All right, so what would have happened if the English settled South America and the Spanish the North? It's a very interesting question, and it's very broad, so I'll try and answer just one sort of very specific point that I know the most about, which has been sort of the style of colonization of the Spanish versus the English, which that the Spanish the Spanish viewed the Native Americans as subjects to the crown. Whenever they arrived at a new location, they would always the first person off the boat would be obviously the captain, but the second person off the boat would always be the notary, the lawyer, the person writing everything down, and they would make it very formal, very clear that this is Spanish land. Now this belongs to the crown. Anyone on it is a subject of the crown, as they were. And indeed, every time that they would arrive at a town where natives lived, they would read out the requerimiento, which of course was in Spanish, so the natives wouldn't understand it, but essentially saying that you are now subjects to the crown, and if you try and fight back, you are in rebellion to the crown. While on the English side, they have much more typical, at least to us, view that the natives were foreign nations, foreign people that had to be dealt with. In theory, diplomatically, though, of course, a lot of it was just murder, murder and stealing. So it would be very interesting because if the English came to South America, they'd obviously be arriving in a much more populous area with much more formalized empires. And so it would be really interesting to see how they would set out. I'm not entirely sure. The Spanish, probably the best example would be what they did with the people of Cuba, which they saw. I believe I forget it was Columbus, one of his men, that coined the term "niños con barbas," children with beards, to describe these natives in Cuba, which were much more similar, as far as I know, to North American Native Americans, and just sort of bowled them over without much remorse. Of course, in the name of converting them to Christianity, though, of course, most of them did not survive long enough to really go through that process. And there's some really interesting dynamics that I can't quite get into in this short amount of time of who was really about how Christianity changed when it entered the Native American sphere, especially through the Spaniards. One thing that I suppose would be a good example of the Spaniards, because they did come up into North America sometimes. I mean, they conquered all the way through California, at least they claimed land up the way up there and had missions. But if you look at the expedition of a man called Coronado, who went up into Texas and into the Great Plains areas, I believe he got that far north. It was a miserable failure of an expedition, but since it was just a small expedition, he did quote unquote try to interact with the natives diplomatically. A great story though was that when he was up there, a native said that some of the chieftains that were giving him hospitality were hiding gold. Just one random native, and so he decided to believe him versus the people that give him hospitality. Kidnapped the chiefs, tortured them horrifically, and then seemed genuinely surprised, at least by the chronicles, when the tribe then rose up against him and started killing his men, or why the expedition was a failure. But I think one of the big differences would be that also in the goals, the Spaniards are looking mainly for riches, for gold, for conversion to Catholicism, native converts, pure converts. As they continue to expand, the king's empire is also what they're looking to do, while the English are much more private. They're trying to get land for themselves, for companies, to make money. Obviously, the Spaniards want a lot of money, but they're looking more for money through gold and slaves, rather. While the English are looking either to trade, obviously, a little bit with them, more a little bit with them having the upper hand, but also through, as they quickly turn to farming and trying to survive and actually set up a true living colony there. So I think I've just sort of rambled for 5 minutes mostly, but essentially it's such a broad question and so hard to think about in just a short amount of time. But I think, at least from my expertise, the stuff that I know about, a lot of it is the difference between Spanish and English goals and methods of settlement and interactions with the natives.